I woke up with my ceiling glowing, and no, it wasn't a dream. Something has snapped in the fabric of time. That's how thousands of starseeds worldwide are beginning to describe what's happening now. The Pleiadian High Council has just delivered an urgent message. A timeline battle has begun. You will start feeling it, not just in your heart, but in the sky, the earth, and your own mind. If you are one of the chosen, a starseed, or a light carrier, your role is no longer optional. You must hold the light. And here's what you're going to experience next. Zara stood on her rooftop at dawn, barefoot and shivering, not from the cold, but from something else. "There's something off," she whispered. The air didn't feel like air anymore. It felt like static, like the energy before a lightning strike. For days, Zara had been sensing something building. It wasn't anxiety. It was deeper, like a pressure in her chest that wasn't from inside her, but all around her. She could feel the timeline, yes, the actual fabric of reality, stretching. "I'm not crazy," she said to herself, even though she hadn't told anyone what was happening. The birds were flying in strange patterns, in circles instead of lines. Her cat, Luna, stared at the corners of rooms and hissed at nothing. Electronics kept glitching in her presence. It wasn't normal. But the worst part was the air. Zara could literally hear it hum. When she reached out her hand, she swore it felt thick, like walking underwater. Then one morning, the air cracked. Not thunder, not a storm. Just this rippling sound that moved from the left side of her head to the right, inside her brain. Zara dropped her coffee and fell to her knees. That was the moment she knew. Something was happening. The timeline wasn't linear anymore. It had started to bend. She could feel people being pulled toward chaos or clarity, like magnets. "You'll feel it too," she said in a voice note to herself. "Maybe not today, but when the light gets heavy and the air buzzes, that's when the crack opens." Zara didn't go to work that day. She went into the woods instead. Something deep inside told her the answers wouldn't be on a screen or in a text message. "They warned us," she whispered. "The battle isn't about guns, it's about frequency." And now, that frequency was changing. Kai didn't want to believe in any of this. Pleiadians, timelines, light missions. But when the headache started at exactly 11:11 every night, he stopped laughing. "Okay, this isn't normal," he muttered. The world around him began to feel like two movies playing at once. He'd walk into a room and feel joy one second, then dread the next. It wasn't just mood swings, it was dimensional bleeding. That's what the voice said in his dreams. One night, during a blackout in his city, he heard a high-pitched sound in the silence. Not outside, inside his mind. And then a whisper. "You are being pulled between two Earths. Choose the light." The next day, Kai noticed something strange. His old friends felt heavier. Their energy dragged him down. When he tried to speak about what he was experiencing, they mocked him, called him woo-woo. But it didn't stop the visions. It didn't stop the way animals looked at him like they knew he had changed. Then it happened. A full collapse of time. He was in a grocery store when everything stopped, literally froze, and then shifted. For a second, Kai saw two versions of the same space. One clean, full of vibrant color and calm, and the other chaotic, red-tinted, and loud. Only he seemed aware of both. "They told me this would happen," he whispered. "The war wouldn't come with tanks. It would come with tones." The tones came every day now. High-frequency pulses in his ears that made him feel sick or euphoric depending on his surroundings. Kai had to stop going places where people were arguing or where the energy was toxic. It would literally make him collapse. So he made his choice. "I'm staying in the higher earth," he said, alone in his room, drawing geometric shapes on the wall that appeared in his sleep. "I'll ride this frequency war out. I'll anchor the light." And he did. Elira was a night owl, but she never used to wake up at 3:33 a.m. until this month. It started with a buzzing in her ears, followed by the overwhelming urge to sit up. At first, she thought it was insomnia, but on the seventh night, everything changed. She opened her eyes and the entire room was bathed in indigo light. "I must be dreaming," she whispered. She wasn't. Hovering above her bed was a symbol glowing gold, two triangles spinning within a circle. Her body felt frozen, but her mind was wide awake. She heard voices, layered on top of each other like a choir of stars. "We are the Council. You are activated. The timeline shift requires your presence." Elira wanted to scream, but she couldn't. Instead, a wave of calm washed over her. Her room faded, and suddenly, she was standing in a circular chamber made of crystalline walls. In front of her, beings of light stood without mouths or eyes, but full of intelligence. They spoke through symbols and sound. She understood everything. "You are a seer," they said. "You will receive visions for others. Write them down. The battle is energetic, and you are a mapper." She was returned to her bed instantly. It was 3:34 a.m. Every night afterward, at the same time, she would receive visions of floods, of light pillars, of people awakening. She filled notebooks. She shared some on social media. The posts went viral. People said they had the same dream. It wasn't a dream. It was a call. And if you've been waking at 3:33, you've already been contacted, just like Elira. Orion wasn't into spirituality. He was an engineer, grounded, practical. Until one morning he looked in the mirror and saw his veins glowing faintly blue. "What the hell?" he gasped. At first, he thought it was a reflection or lighting trick, but every day it got brighter, not painful, just radiant. And then the dreams started. Vivid dreams of stars, sacred codes, and spirals. In the dreams, beings of light touched his spine and whispered numbers. 963. Activate. Golden ratio unlocked. During waking hours, Orion began to experience surges of insight. He could solve complex problems in seconds. He started hearing tones in nature. The wind sounded like a song. When he placed his hands on plants, they moved toward him. One night, he woke up with his chest glowing. Not metaphorically. His sternum had actual points of light radiating out. "Your DNA has crystalline layers," a voice said within him. "You are mutating into the light body form." Orion didn't believe it until he went for blood work. The nurse asked him twice, "Are you taking something?" "Your cells are unusually energized." His heartbeat was lower. His sleep cycles shifted. He needed less food. He began to download knowledge in silence, just sitting still and receiving information like a hard drive from the stars. And when he touched others, especially those struggling, they reported feeling warm, seen, healed. "I don't know what's happening to me," Orion finally said to a friend, "but I think I'm becoming something new." And he was. Nova always had vivid dreams, but they were never this specific. It wasn't a dream. It was an assignment, she would say the morning after. "I saw a giant map, not of countries, but energy centers across Earth, and I was told where to go." It all began on a Tuesday night. She laid down like normal, but the moment her eyes shut, she was pulled out of her body. It didn't feel like falling asleep. It felt like launching. She found herself in a luminous hall filled with beings cloaked in liquid gold. One of them stepped forward and looked at her without speaking. A large sigil hovered in the air between them. "Your task has been activated," the being said telepathically. "You are a beacon. You will anchor light in chaos zones. You will not need to understand it. You will simply need to show up." The next morning, Nova wrote down every detail. She couldn't shake the feeling of urgency. She checked the location shown in her vision. It was an abandoned church 40 miles away. She drove there, no idea why, no plan, just her body moving with a certainty she didn't understand. When she entered the building, a wave of warmth hit her like a soft explosion in her chest. She fell to her knees and began to hum, not a tune she knew, but something ancient. She didn't even know where it came from. That night, dozens of crows left the roof of the church and never returned. Nova continued to dream. Each time she was shown a new place. Each time she went. And every time she arrived, something shifted. The energy lightened. Strangers would join her. Children would smile and follow her as if they recognized her. "You'll be assigned a mission too," she'd later tell others. "And it won't come in a message. It'll come in a dream you can't ignore." Lennox noticed it first in his sister. She forgot her birthday. Her own birthday, he told a friend. But it didn't stop there. His co-workers began forgetting basic things. Where they parked, who they talked to, entire events that had happened just the day before. People were calling it stress, but Lennox knew better. He had seen it in his dreams weeks earlier. Rows of people with blank faces being scanned by beams of blue light. "They're wiping memories," a voice had told him. "Not to harm, to reset. Those unanchored to the light will forget this chapter." At first he thought it was metaphorical, but when his father forgot how to use his phone and he'd been using it for years, Lennox snapped. "These are resets," he said out loud. "Timeline purges." The more he investigated, the more he noticed a pattern. People who resisted change, growth, or inner work were the ones affected. It was as if the new frequency had no place to anchor inside them, so their minds just released it. "They're not being punished," Lennox would say. "They're being cleared." He noticed something else too. Those who did align with the light, meditators, healers, empaths, were retaining memory better than ever. Some were even remembering things they had never studied, ancient languages, cosmic math, past life fragments. Lennox began recording his dreams, documenting strange visions of light screens and higher councils. He shared it online and thousands responded with the same story. "My mom forgot how old I was. My boyfriend forgot we broke up last week. My teacher forgot my name." The veil wasn't thinning anymore. It was shifting timelines. And the ones who chose not to align? Their minds would reset to neutral, like a computer returned to factory settings. "I watched my neighbor argue with a street lamp for 10 minutes, Arya whispered. The world was cracking, not physically, psychologically. Arya had always been sensitive, but now her intuition was screaming. Every time she walked past someone, she could feel their thoughts, not hear them, feel them. Disoriented, panicked, floating. Then came the hallucinations. People around her started seeing things that weren't there, talking to people who didn't exist. Arya would gently ask them, "Are you okay?" And they'd respond with things like, "Didn't you see the door vanish?" Or, "The sky just spoke to me." It was happening in public, in cafes, on subways, and no one knew how to explain it. She began to sense it was related to frequency. "The ones resisting truth," she said, "are splitting." It wasn't drugs, it wasn't madness, it was timeline collapse. They were stuck between dimensions, flickering between the old Earth and the emerging one. Some would laugh uncontrollably. Others would weep without warning. Some would sleep 18 hours straight. Arya began carrying crystals and tuning forks, not for healing, but for anchoring. If she stayed centered, it helped stabilize the people near her. But some couldn't be helped. Her cousin, who mocked her spiritual work for years, suddenly stopped recognizing his own reflection. He said the mirror was showing someone else, she explained. He wasn't scared, just confused. That's when she knew. This wasn't mental illness. This was spiritual displacement. Arya took time every night to light a candle and pray for clarity, not for herself, but for the world, because the cracks were spreading, and not everyone was going to make it across the bridge with their sanity intact. Jalen always loved the night sky, but nothing prepared him for what he saw in April 2025. It started as a dream, golden symbols rotating in the sky like a massive celestial clock. When he woke up, he couldn't shake the vision. It burned in his mind. Then it happened. He was walking his dog at dusk when he saw it. 3 interlocking circles glowing in the clouds. No planes, no lights, just hovering there, perfectly symmetrical. And they weren't clouds. They shimmered like glass. He pulled out his phone to take a picture, but it wouldn't turn on. In that moment, something unlocked inside him. He felt an energy surge from the base of his spine to the top of his head. His heart pounded, not in fear, but recognition. "This is the signal," he whispered. The next night, the symbols appeared again, but this time above his house. Other neighbors saw it too. Some ignored it. Others ran inside. But Jalen stood there, arms open. He saw flash visions, sacred geometry, light scrolls, faces of beings he couldn't describe. A voice came through him like thunder. "The sky is not decoration. It is a screen. Your code has been activated." For the next week, Jalen would see symbols in nature, on leaves, on windows, in reflections. He drew them all. He didn't know what they meant, but when he shared them online, others responded, "I've seen these too." The symbols weren't just random. They were triggers, keys. Each one unlocked a new understanding, a new ability. Jalen began to heal with his hands. He could sense danger before it happened. His dreams became training missions, and he understood, finally. The sky was speaking. Not to everyone, just to those who were ready to remember. It started as a low tone in Soren's right ear. Not painful, not annoying, just persistent, like a subtle humming from the edge of reality. But it wasn't tinnitus. It only happened when he was alone, always around 4 a.m., and no one else could hear it. One night, Soren sat up in bed and said out loud, "If someone's calling me, speak clearly." What followed wasn't a sound, but a pull. His body tingled, and suddenly, a memory surfaced. Not from this life, but from some ancient place made of light and crystal. "You are being summoned," the memory whispered. He got up and walked into the kitchen, barefoot and disoriented. He didn't know why, but he opened the back door and stepped outside. The wind was completely still, yet it felt as if something moved through him. Then it hit him, a wave of grief so powerful it knocked him down. Not his grief, not human grief, cosmic grief. "They're calling," Soren whispered, "and no one else hears it because it's meant for me." That morning, his friend texted him with a joke, completely unaware of the world shift that had happened the night before. He realized then, this wasn't a group call, it was a personal transmission. One only he could hear. Not everyone in his life was meant to come with him. Some would remain on the old frequency, blissfully unaware. The calls got louder each night, but never in sound, in emotion, in knowing. And then came the first words: anchor, transmit, speak the light. Since then, Soren would wake up each day with a phrase in his head, a message from beyond that he'd post online or write down. Strangers would message him, saying, "How did you know I needed this today?" And Soren never took credit. "It wasn't from me," he'd reply. "I just answered the call." Rhea had practiced yoga and chakra work for years, but nothing prepared her for the night her entire spine lit up with energy. She wasn't meditating, she was washing dishes. Out of nowhere, she felt a surge begin at her tailbone, warm, electric, alive. It wasn't scary, it was holy. The energy rose slowly through her body like molten gold, stopping at each chakra and releasing memories, emotions, even forgotten smells. When it hit her heart, she burst into tears, not sad tears, soul remembrance tears. "I remember who I am," she whispered, dropping the sponge. That night, she lay in bed, heart pounding. A violet flame danced in her third eye. Her entire crown tingled, not like pins and needles, but like someone was pouring light into her skull. In the days that followed, her voice changed. She began to speak with more authority. People told her they could feel calm just by being near her. Then came the dreams. Each night she was taken to a temple in the stars, where beings touched her chakras and upgraded them, not just cleansing, but expanding. They gave her tools, sound keys, breath patterns, and light grids. "You're not just clearing," they told her, "you're being rebuilt." Every color became more vibrant. Her emotions were sharper but easier to navigate. Her intuition, nearly instant. She didn't teach chakra healing anymore. She became the healing. When a stranger touched her hand at the grocery store and began crying without knowing why, she knew her chakras were now transmitters. And this was only the beginning. Kale always thought time was fixed, past, present, future, all in a neat row. That belief shattered the day he blinked and found himself having conversations that hadn't happened yet. He was driving home when it first occurred. A clear sentence formed in his mind. "Don't go the long way. There's going to be a crash." He obeyed the voice. 10 minutes later, he saw flashing lights in the direction he almost took. At first, he called it a fluke, but it kept happening. He'd meet someone new and already know their name. He'd dream about events, then watch them unfold exactly as seen. Eventually, time became fluid. He'd sit down to work, and what felt like 30 minutes turned into 4 hours, or 2 minutes. Time stretched and contracted like breath. Then one day, he fell into what he later called quantum flow. It was like stepping outside the grid. Everything slowed down, and yet he moved faster, physically, mentally, emotionally. He could feel all versions of himself overlapping. His past trauma, present choices, and future greatness merged. "You're not bound to linear time anymore," said the Pleiadian voice that visited him during dream state. "You've unlocked access to multidimensional perception." He began seeing patterns, timelines, paths people were headed toward. And more importantly, he could feel when he was being pulled off course. Time wasn't the enemy. It was the tool. And when he surrendered to it, he flowed with the universe instead of against it. Thalia always felt like she was remembering something she hadn't been taught. As a child, she'd draw strange symbols no one understood. In school, she could solve complex equations without knowing how. And in her teens, she began speaking ancient-sounding words in her sleep. She kept it hidden. Until one afternoon in 2025, she was walking through a bookstore when her hand suddenly reached for a dusty, untranslated manuscript. The moment she touched it, a jolt shot up her arms. She could read it. "I've seen this before," she whispered, eyes scanning the ancient runes. Later that night, she lit a candle and began copying the pages into her journal. Words she had never consciously known flowed from her pen like water. "You're remembering," a voice said in the silence. "You've carried this for lifetimes." From then on, she began unlocking knowledge like buried treasure. She knew herbs for healing. She could sing tones that helped animals recover from injury. She even remembered the sky configurations of star systems that hadn't yet been discovered. People called her gifted. But Thalia knew better. She wasn't gifted. She was remembering. And you will too. Lucian never believed in the term light body. He thought it was spiritual fluff until he couldn't fit into his own skin anymore. It began with a strange sensation in his chest, like something was trying to stretch out from inside, not painful, just big. He described it like having wings inside my ribs pressing to open. Then came the light. One night while meditating, Lucian saw his hands glowing. It wasn't imagination. The light was soft, white, and moving, alive. His entire body became surrounded by a subtle field, almost like heat shimmer. "I'm not just a body anymore," he whispered to his cat, who stared at him with awe. For days afterward, people around him started behaving oddly. Strangers smiled and nodded without reason. Children stared at him and said things like, "You look shiny." Even technology acted different. His phone stayed at 100% battery for 3 days. He went to a sacred spot in the mountains, following an intuitive nudge. There, something massive unfolded. As he stood barefoot on the rocks, he could feel his body expanding, not physically, but energetically. His field went out 20 feet, then 50th. And he could sense others' fields too, dense, contracted, chaotic. "Your light body has activated," a voice said in his inner ear. "You will now begin to affect space itself." He started noticing that when he walked into rooms, arguments stopped, people relaxed, plants leaned toward him, and when he closed his eyes, he could see golden threads between people, places, timelines. He didn't seek attention, he simply existed, and his existence itself was anchoring light. Lucien's body still functioned, but he knew it was now just a vessel. The real him was no longer inside. It was everywhere. Naya had always felt a pull to certain places, old forests, sacred wells, mountain peaks, but never understood why until she stood on a cliff in late spring 2025. That day, she felt the ground beneath her breathe. She dropped to her knees and placed both hands on the earth. A pulse shot up through her arms, then into her heart, then her crown. In an instant, she saw a glowing network stretching across the globe, lines of light, grids of sacred energy. She wasn't alone. Others like her were standing at points around the earth at that very moment, receiving the same activation. "You are a grid keeper," the voice said in her chest. "You remember how to awaken Earth's ancient circuitry." From that day, Naya began visiting ley lines, power spots, and portals, not as a tourist, but as a technician of energy. She would place her hands on the stones, hum specific tones that came through her body, and watch as birds change flight paths above her. Sometimes she met others, not by plan, by divine timing, one in Ireland, one in Peru, one in Tibet, all different, yet instantly connected. They exchanged dreams that matched, visions of a new Earth web being constructed by people who weren't waiting for permission. They knew. Naya began drawing the grid she saw during meditations, lines of light connecting cities, forests, deserts. She didn't understand all of it, but she knew enough to act. Everywhere she went, the land felt lighter after her visit. Earth responded to her presence because she remembered her soul contract. The grid keepers weren't famous, they weren't loud, but they were waking up, quietly, powerfully, globally. And one day soon, their work would reactivate something humanity forgot, the living heart of Earth. Orion had spent most of his life feeling like he had to dim himself down. Too intense, too weird, too much. But when the timeline battle began, he couldn't hide anymore. It started with a moment of choice. He was standing in line at a pharmacy, and the man in front of him began shouting at the cashier. The old version of Orion would have looked away. Not now. He stepped forward and simply said, "That's not how we treat people." The moment he spoke, the room shifted. The man paused, blinked, and left without another word. The cashier stared at Orion like he was glowing. "Did you do something just now?" she asked. That was the first time Orion felt it. His field stabilized an entire situation, not with violence, not with ego, but with anchored presence. The voice came back that night. You will no longer react. You will now anchor. Orion started to embody it. He didn't need to try anymore. He was the timeline of light. Everything he touched, every word, every action, carried a frequency that realigned chaos. He began mentoring others, not by teaching, but simply by being near them. Their lives changed, their vision sharpened. He wasn't trying to lead, he was holding the line. And as more starseeds began to fall into alignment, they gravitated toward him. Not for worship, for calibration. They were remembering too. And in 2025, when everything felt like it was falling apart, Orion would stand still in the center of it all, radiating calm, clarity, and conviction. He had become the timeline itself. Kalen never fit in, not with his family, not at school, not even in his spiritual circles. You feel otherworldly, people would say. But it wasn't a compliment. It was code for different. Then the dream started. Each night, Kalen would find himself aboard a glowing craft. Not mechanical, but organic, like it breathed. And inside were people he somehow knew, though he had never met them in this lifetime. They wore robes of light. Some had eyes that sparkled like galaxies. They never spoke with words, only through presence. You've waited long enough, one of them said. They will start finding you now. Within days, it began. First, a woman at a bookstore walked up to him and said, I think we knew each other before Earth. She was shaking. Kalen smiled and nodded. No explanation needed. Then, 2 men followed him after a meditation group. One of them simply said, We've been receiving the same symbols as you. He showed Kalen his drawings. They matched what Kalen had kept private for years. One by one, they came. Strangers who weren't strangers. Souls who remembered. People who called themselves by names not of this earth. Elion, Marith, Kalarian. He didn't question them. He felt them. Every meeting sparked activation. They'd exchange dreams. Then both would see the same planet in their visions. They'd touch hands, and warmth would radiate for hours. One woman began weeping the moment he hugged her. I finally found one of mine, she whispered. Kalen began creating spaces for them to gather, not to preach, but to remember. Campfires, stargazing nights, light code circles, no agenda, just resonance. The Pleiadian voice returned one night during his sleep. You were never meant to walk alone. You are a node, a connector. The others are finding their way back to you now. And Kalen knew. This was no longer about surviving Earth. This was about reuniting the family that had scattered across galaxies, lifetimes, and star systems. One soul at a time, the tribe was reforming. Lyra had always been terrified of death. Even as a child, she'd stay awake imagining what nothing felt like. The dark, the silence, the end. But in 2025, everything shifted. It started with a spontaneous out-of-body experience during a nap. One moment, she was curled up on her couch. The next, she was above her body, floating. She didn't panic. She laughed. I'm still here, she thought. I'm more me now than when I'm in that body. From there, the fear began to dissolve. She began to see through the veil. At funerals, she felt the spirits smiling. In dreams, she spoke with ancestors she'd never met. You didn't come to die, one of them told her. You came to remember. And then it happened. One day, while meditating under the full moon, Lyra received the download. Images of past lives, future incarnations, and star missions flooded her awareness. She saw why she came to Earth. She chose this. I'm a volunteer, she whispered. I chose this body, this pain, this timeline. And with that realization, death lost its grip. She began living differently, no longer afraid to speak truth, no longer worried about failing, She danced more, laughed louder, loved deeper, because she knew now there was no end. There was only continuation. When her uncle passed, she sat in silence and felt him hug her, not symbolically, physically. Her entire back warmed like he was right behind her. "You're awake now," he said just once. Then silence. Lyra became a guide for others facing grief, not to tell them death wasn't real, but to remind them that life never ends. And she would tell them with absolute certainty, the moment you stop fearing death is the moment you finally begin to live.